And tell me how what's been the impact or the results, the biggest changes, I guess, the biggest evolution when you sort of said, okay, I'm going to dance on because it's a little bit, it's more encompassing. Yeah, it's like the run squad, the tri squad. These programs that we talk about, they're programs, they're not planned. So we have these sort of very flexible for folks that are not purple patch athletes, very flexible, dynamic programs that integrate and work with the demands of life, but also the sort of wealth of education that comes with it and supporting information and resources and tools. So when you immerse from your experience obviously I'm not asking this for to make it a huge advertorial or anything like that, but what were some of the evolutions, changes, benefits of you getting involved in the program? How did it spark your performance?
Well, the first thing I was able to get on a year-round progressive training program, which, I had some structure. I could focus on key sessions, which had an intent that I could follow. I knew what the purpose of my session was. I knew what each phase of the year, the purpose for each phase of the year. And it was just like I learned so much and it was just tremendous help. And then I was able to sit down and on every Sunday and do what y'all call the Sunday special. I made a commitment to that so I could sit down, organize my training, and integrate the four pillars into that, so I could focus not just on strength and my run and multi-sport, but also focus on my nutrition, how to eat around training during the week, and how to plan my training so I could get enough sleep if I needed a recovery day. So those were some of the primary things that I initially used. And then later, of course, coaching consults have been extremely invaluable for me.
Oh yeah, having
Just
yeah, and for folks listening, what that is the opportunity for an athlete to lock in a spot one to one with a coach for a really small fee, where you can really dig into your own individual, whether it's scheduling, whether it's race strategy, whether it's planning and what workouts are appropriate, etc. But little 30 or 60-minute slots that you can spend, and so you've leveraged quite a lot over the course of your journey, yeah.
yes, one of my biggest mistakes was not using them sooner, but yes, they have been invaluable for my training. I've learned so much, and they really helped me understand the program and set up race specific workouts. So yeah, very valuable.
I want to take a pause on the questions, and I just want to do a little reflection, and I hope I don't embarrass you with this, Rachel. You're a freaking smart athlete. It's everything you said right now. Getting into this sport and deciding to train on for marathons, and 45 years of age, you go to the World Wide Web, blizzard of information, and through there, you're straight away you're integrating some really smart things on your own, saying, "Okay, yeah, multi-sport is good for me. That makes me feel good. I'm going to do strength training. Like thumbs up, great." And you come in. The first thing that you say when I said, and we didn't stage this. I said, what was the biggest impact? And the first two things that you say is, I got into a year-round progressive program, and I effectively, put in words you meant, unlocked effectiveness through the Sunday special. I think those are two absolute cornerstones of effective training for someone that wants to get better. You are training for marathons. And the biggest mistake that people make is, okay, we've just had Boston. I've got Boston coming up. So what do I need to do over these 12 weeks to get ready for that? Now I've got make it up Berlin. I'm going to go and get ready for this race. And you've got this through line mindset of, I need to get on year round structured training that's progressive. Thumbs up. That's huge. That's so valuable. And then the Sunday special, I think that is the habit where spending just a little bit of time, it doesn't matter whether you're a really busy mum of seven, trying to do marathon training, leading a multinational organization, an elite professional athlete, a little bit of time, right, why we love to call it Sunday is most people venture into Monday. We're looking at all components of life and all components of performance, nutrition, recovery, sleep, exactly what you talked about. And organizing is probably the greatest key to unlock effectiveness and productivity. And so you can tell you're making my heart explode a little bit here because that's the golden stuff. Fantastic, and so it's terrific. And I guess to sort of wrap it up, what's the and sorry, I'm on a monologue, but I'm going to keep going. And then you lean into this thing that I think is sitting there as a little pot of gold for folks on these, incredibly affordable the Run Squad program, and leaning into the individual expertise of that coach consult, really valuable because it again is another tool that you say, okay, now I've carved through that noise, and I know where I'm going, and I'm able to create consistency. So I'd love to know what the outcome of all of that is. How you're feeling as an athlete now? It sounds like you're doing really, really well. And what's your broad perspective on yourself as an athlete now? You're a few years into this. How are things going? I guess.
Things are going really well. I mean, I really enjoy my training. It's fun, it's challenging. It adds a lot of quality to my life rather than being a stressor. And, we've talked about it. I've been able to stay healthy, which is one of the reasons I wanted to follow multi-sport, because I really believed that it would decrease my likelihood of developing overuse injury. So that's and it's done that. And as far as races, I've been able to perform well in the races. I've been able to set a PR in half marathon, 10K, 5K. And, one of my goals was to be able to be competitive in my age group. And I'm now competitive in my age group. And so, as far as that goes, I've been able to accomplish that. And my training is just fun, and that's what it's all about, is just enjoying it, having a good time, and, making it a part of your life, but not the only thing in your life.
That's the definition of a purple patch athlete. It's a part of your life. I was just about to say, it sounds like this whole journey is additive to the most important stuff of your life, being a mum and everything else that you've got going on in life that we haven't dug into today. But it sounds like it's really additive and complementary rather than a distraction or a source of tension or conflict in a way.
Yeah, exactly. It is. And I think one other thing that's helped me is just looking at training from a long term approach. That has helped me so much. It takes the pressure off of performing, and, whether you miss a workout or whether you have to take a recovery day, just that's just something that I feel like is really been beneficial. Just that philosophy that y'all have taught about long term approach.
It's fantastic. I guess my last question is for listeners, and we're going to have listeners that are running that are maybe struggling with cycles of injuries or feel like it's maybe that a part of their identity they have to break 4 hours or break 5 hours or break 3 hours, whatever it is. Otherwise, they're a failure. Like a lot of sort of challenges, people that are maybe struggling to fit this into life. But some people that think, I can't do this. I've got too much other stuff going on or whatever it might be. Have a broad swath of listeners that might gain inspiration. And I guess as an athlete, for those listeners, what are a few of the maybe the key lessons that you would like to, as an athlete, tell them that you've gone through? What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned over the course of your journey?
I think the biggest lessons for me would be to focus on, as I said earlier, the long term approach, and focus on being consistent, and try to be as effectively organized as you possibly can, so that you can make the most use of your time, optimize your time. And, just if you look at it from a long term perspective, you can enjoy the journey, enjoy the training, rather than just focusing on one particular race. You've got a lot to look forward to if you're focusing on the long term approach.
It's fantastic. Well, I can't thank you enough, and it's been so inspirational and such a joy. But beyond that, I just want to say, great job. Keep being you. Keep the mindset and keep driving forward, because it's really challenging to get things right, and you're getting things right. And that's why coaches coach. When you like to see that and you see it, so it makes my heart flutter. So thank you very much for joining the show, Rachel, and sharing your story. And I really hope that folks that are listening, we've got a few that are going to spark the excitement, the desire, the courage to really kickstart their journey and start having fun along the journey, but also having a lot of fun, having a lot of success as well. So I really appreciate you being here today.
Well, thank you for having me and keep up the good work.
Thanks so much. Take care. We welcome to the show a very familiar face to everyone at Purple Patch, and including myself, Tiger Paton. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Matt.
Hello there.
Good to be
It's
here.
nice to not just be in another meeting. And in fact, we're going to have a really fun conversation over the next 20 or 30 minutes. For listeners who don't know, Tiger is actually a team member of Purple Patch. And you might think, well, why am I asking Tiger to come on a show as a Purple Patch team member? But your story becoming a part of the Purple Patch team is a little different. We love to recruit from the inside, as it were, but you were originally a Purple Patch athlete, paying member, a very noisy one, really engaged in the community, and have, I think, a really lovely story. And among all of the Purple Patch athletes, I think you've really leveraged the program to the hilt. And Kelly and I were having so many conversations, so many emails with you now, what feels like many moons ago, and finally said, "Will you just come and join us? Will you just become a part of the team?" And now you oversee all of the Purple Patch squad programs. Everyone that is a Purple Patch athlete knows you. But my conversation today, why I wanted you on the show, is for Tiger the athlete. And I think you've got a lovely story. So I'm so glad that you're willing to share with the listeners some of your journey. Are you ready for this?
I am longtime listener, first time caller. So let's do it.
Very true. So you know how it goes. You've listened to the show. I love to hear a little bit of background. You are a Midwesterner, so why don't you give the listeners a little bit of background in family life, everything like that to begin?
Yeah, so I've lived pretty much my whole life in the Chicago suburbs. Not a whole lot of terrain or elevation out here, but it's been great. And I'm really grateful to have had a super supportive family, super supportive parents, one older brother, and provided a lot of great role modeling in a lot of ways, but not anything related to sport. And so I grew up in a pretty nerdy family, grew up pretty nerdy myself, watched a lot more Indy 500s than NFL football games, and so I didn't have a lot of initial structure for sport, but certainly was your typical active kid, and very much more of a bookworm than an athlete growing up.
Yeah, were sports in any way really a part of your childhood?
I think I dabbled a little bit here and there at a very hobby level. I did some dance, and then later on, I did get into horseback riding. So I did that for several years, and that was one of the things that actually um, ended up setting me a bit on this journey. I had a pretty severe injury um, from that sport, and but I never did anything serious. I never did really like organized sports or anything like that. And because I had some health quirks and some other things, I never really thought that that was a path for me either. And so I just tended to go in another direction more academically.
Oh, so now as we talk, you've done multiple half Ironmans. You've done well in them. You've certainly developed athletically over the last few years. But what was the catalyst to get into endurance sports of all things?
So it was uh it was initially what tipped the scales was a friend who was doing an Ironman who just would not shut up about it, and she happened to be doing this at a time in my life where I really needed a change, and I didn't realize how much I needed it. Um, she was doing it for her own reasons. She also really needed a change in her life, and I thought maybe this is what I need. Maybe this is what I should be doing. I was in a place where I knew it wasn't where I wanted to be mentally or physically, but I also didn't know quite how to get out of that. And we can talk a bit more about that there. But it was really a moment where I said, maybe I'll try this. I'd done a few things here or there, but just didn't really know where to start um, actually, on the path of becoming an athlete, and had this opportunity put in front of me. So I decided, without being able to run a mile or swim across a pool, to sign up for my first triathlon.
It was literally. It's funny. I recently had a discussion with a purple patch athlete, Ben Cooper, who said to me, "I just had to get going. I needed to take the first step." And you're sort of very much like that. Would as sharing as much as you feel comfortable? What was the broad sort of challenges you had? Physical challenges, yeah, as well as broad challenges. Share a little bit of context there if you can.
Yeah, so I think part of it was where, kind of on the life performance side, where I was. I After college, I worked some physically active jobs and all of that, and then, like a lot of people, ended up shifting to a more sedentary desk job type situation, and didn't really realize the slow effect that had, the transition away from just daily life activity, that had on my overall health. I had these underlying health conditions, and in that shift to a desk job, the other thing that had changed there was that I was working for startups. I was working for some smaller companies. It was a great experience, but there was an enormous amount of additional life stress. And so I had the addition of the stress, the reduction of the physical activity that exacerbated some of those underlying conditions. And I developed an enormous amount of fatigue and stress, and ended up in that kind of cycle where you don't feel great, so you don't do anything. And because you're not doing anything, you just end up feeling worse. And that kind of cycle slowly continued. And then the other thing that happened was that, when I did try to break out of that, when I did try to get into activities or other things, that I ended up with a lot of injuries, because I didn't know how to do this correctly. And I didn't have any of the sort of supporting connective tissue or infrastructure around, how to fuel right for these activities, how to have the right technique, any of that. And so a lot of my initial attempts to kind of break out of this inevitably ended up with me in failure. And so I didn't really have a good way, a good path out of where I was. And so I ended up really tired, really stressed, and without a good sense of how to actually break through that and set myself up for success. And I didn't really know what success would even look like for me, because I just assumed, well, I have these shortcomings, I have these physical limitations. Maybe this is just what my life should look like. And it really wasn't until I did that triathlon and I said, I was so sure I wasn't going to be able to do it. And then I did it. And I'm like, what else can't I do? And that, I think, helped me kind of reframe and say, okay, maybe I don't feel like I can get out of this, but what if I was wrong? What if there is a way out? And so I really just needed to figure out a way to break out of the fatigue and injury cycle. And Purple Patch, actually, oddly, was showed up in my life at just the right time for
Well,
that.
and I'll ask that, but I sort of so you had this. I just want to repaint the picture a little bit. You had this sedentary job. You were mentally, physically
Yep.
fatigued. You took the step. You took to do something better. Was your approach, pretty random as you went through that? You sort of trained for this thing, but you ended up in doing something good. Maybe started to feel better, but also we're stuck in this cycle of what should I really be doing? And maybe this is going to be a journey that's also saddled with a different set of injuries, a different set of fatigue. Is that an accurate representation of it?
For sure. I perhaps could have picked a simpler sport to start with,
Yeah.
but I did. I came into it, and I didn't really know. There was a lot of competing messaging, and a lot of the traditional messaging that was out there when I started to get interested and excited about the sport was still very much a traditional, like, you got to go hard. You have to,
Yeah.
you
Accumulate
have to
miles.
really, yeah. And so it wasn't necessarily a sustainable approach, but I was trying to weave through all of this complexity around how I was supposed to train and how many hours and how to fuel and how to do all of these things. And it was, even though it was an exciting adventure in a lot of ways, it was also really overwhelming. And for somebody that didn't grow up a D1 swimmer or super experienced in sport, it was really tough to navigate. And that also just added more to the stress, especially because I was busy already. And the thought of trying to figure out now, adding time on to figure out how to navigate all of this was
Incredibly
tough.
complex. So how did you? I don't even and apologize. I don't remember exactly when you joined Purple Patch, because we spend every day with each other now, and so how did you find Purple Patch, and 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 what was the catalyst of reaching out and becoming a part of the squad?
Yeah, it was, again, just trying to sift through all of the messaging that was out there. I listened to a lot of podcasts. You were on a different, I think, triathlon podcast, and I kind of liked what I heard. And I eventually realized that you had your own, and I started listening to it. And what really resonated with me was this idea that even though this is a complex sport, and even though this is like a really big journey, that there's actually you can make it really simple and really sustainable. And that was so fundamentally different from the traditional, like, go hard, high mileage, high volume type of messaging out there. It was a completely different approach that was centered around here's how to fit this into your life, into the space that you have. And if you do that correctly, you can actually make more space in your life. And it really, what really did it for me was this idea that, like, yes, you can take this incredibly complex thing and you can simplify it, and it's going to enrich not just your fitness levels, not just improve your ability to be an athlete, but there's also all of these other knock-on effects that begin to occur around things that have nothing to do with triathlon, around how you eat, around how you organize your day, around how you start to really take control of your life. And I was in this place where there was so much stress and so much overwhelm. Um, as much as the fitness end of it, I was attracted to, it was almost more this whole other piece, this life performance piece that really that really resonated with me. And I'm like, oh shoot, yeah, I need the fitness, but this other thing, that's what I really need.
It's yeah, you identified in many ways how I see what makes a purple patch athlete in many ways. Sort of the greediness that we are. We want two things. We want to get the results in the sport, but we want the knock on effect and the amplification on that. What have been for you as an athlete? Obviously, you help a lot of athletes now. You organize and lead all of the squad programs. But for you as an athlete, what was some of the biggest or the most impactful components of the program, the methodology for you? What really helped you? I know one of them was definitely the Sunday special. That's because we embed that in our culture at Purple Patch. We eat our own dog food. We do that, but maybe start with there. But I'd love to hear also some of the other components that were really impactful for you as an athlete.
Yeah, I think the Sunday special and this whole concept around learning how to prioritize, learning how to organize, and wrapping your head around the thought that, when everything is key, when everything is important, nothing is. And learning how to really set priorities, that was huge. And that allowed me to have the tools to develop consistency, which was so key. And then, once I had that foundation, it was easier to actually focus my attention on the training itself. And that, there were a variety of things that were huge for me. The first definitely was strength training, and I will shout that from the rooftops all day long. Strength training was pivotal for me, both in terms of being able to rectify all of these long-standing chronic niggles, chronic injuries, finally breaking out of that cycle, addressing a lot of the long-standing imbalances and things that had occurred because of those previous injuries, because of those health issues, and also because I had a sedentary job and lifestyle in a lot of ways. But that really drove overall health and performance improvements on the triathlon side. Um, That was huge. And the technique element was also huge. Learning how to actually do all of this right.
Yeah.
The swim, the run, especially the bike. Again, not a lot of mountains in Illinois, and but the technical elements, learning how to really maximize my posture, my momentum, and all of that was huge. And learning how to moderate my effort, and then all of the supporting elements too, like learning how to fuel properly. That was something that was, I thought I knew how to do. I didn't know how to do it. But all of these other pieces, the fueling, the hydration elements, and all of those then fed into this positive feedback loop where my training was better, and my energy was better, and things started to improve from there.